Hello, you're listening to Work From Home, a Lower Street podcast where we help you stay connected, productive and sane whilst working remotely. In this episode, Harry's talking to Abhishek Paul from Kissflow. It's a process management, case management and project management platform. Now, they're based in Chennai in India. And so Harry and Abhishek talk about remote work culture, how Kissflow handled going remote, how their employees fared during their first time away from the office, and how did this remote work affect the culture of Kissflow. First up, Harry started by talking to Abhishek about what the remote work culture is like in India.
I think the key difference is we've actually been a very top-down culture. I think that's one thing that we need to understand right from our education system onwards. So there is always a lot of oversight that happens, a lot of rules that are in place. I don't know if you can call it very less trust in the system, but the assumption has been that if you let people to their own devices, they're just work won't get done, right? So whether it's school or college or then that carries into our workspace as well. And we've always worked on, bringing people together, building huge offices and having everybody travel and work under the supervision of the manager. And sadly, even though we are a big IT destination, we've never really leveraged it to use remote work or work from home. The shift that happened over the last couple of years is companies slowly started experimenting a bit. So you had the large services companies saying, 2 days out of a week, right? It was almost like grudgingly parting away with some power simply because there was a huge demand from people for that. So they used to experiment with 2 days at the most, 2 days in a month. I really forget the number that you could work from home. That's the extent that we've gone to. I honestly don't know any company that was primarily remote, let alone fully remote in India.
Right. And how has the sort of office environment changed post-COVID then? So people are still coming into the office at the moment. Is that how things are in our current state?
I don't know if we are post-COVID yet. We are post-lockdown, which means you are allowed to travel, things are opening up. But there are severe restrictions. For example, most offices have primarily said, we don't open till January at least, while some have said it's going to be June or July, so plan accordingly. At Kissflow, what we've done is we've told them, the office is open, but we strongly recommend that you stay wherever you are and there is no need for you to come to office. Everybody has a good home infrastructure allowance that we've given them, their own laptops and good internet connection. And we said, work is getting done, so let's just stay safe. Though rules have eased, we are still pretty much in a wait and watch period. So most companies are still, at least the IT companies, I couldn't talk about other industries. IT companies are primarily still working remotely.
And how do you, so if this is kind of a relatively new, or let's say remote work is less widely adopted in India than it is in other countries, what's the sort of response been? Like, how does everyone feel from the employee side right the way up to the employer side? Like, is everyone comfortable with it, or do they? So here in the UK, as I'm sure you hear, and it's much the same in India, like some of the biggest concerns are, I'm so worried that my boss thinks I'm not working, or, and so people are working more and they're sort of curating their video background when they're on calls to make sure that they look professional, that kind of stuff. Like, how has the sort of cultural adoption been, do you think?
It's quite interesting. I think we were hesitant to call this an actual test of remote work simply because given the added stress of lockdown, we cut away so many social connections that people had, right? So while they were working from home and working remotely, you couldn't call this like a standard test of remote work, right? So we had to kind of be sensitive to that. You can't just tell them, hey, have you gotten this done? Because we really didn't know. There were places that were shutting down. People were, locked up in their homes. They couldn't step out. So many things were happening. So keeping that to one side, as a company, what we were pleasantly surprised about was the increase in productivity. We were actually budgeting for about a 30% dip in productivity, but we were pleasantly surprised to see initially that people were more productive. One thing that really helped us at Kissflow was that 2 weeks before the country went into lockdown, we were actually seeing the trend across Europe and America of countries going into shutdown. So we said, you know what, it's only a matter of time before it happens in India. I mean, at that time, we had no idea that it will be for months and end. We thought it will be a 21-day lockdown. That was the period they had said. So we said, why not we see if we can handle it? So we actually announced remote work 2 weeks before the country went into lockdown. So we had a series of discussions. Each department came in and they said, you know, what's happening? What do we need to work remotely? What are the dependencies? Can we actually work remotely? And our employees started working remotely before this announcement was made. So in a sense, they were a little bit more prepared. It wasn't a shock like, don't come to office from tomorrow onwards. I think that helped us ease into it. The second thing that was unexpected, just like the positive productivity in the beginning, there was a dip in productivity as time went on, as the whole thing continued. Like that's when people found it difficult to switch off work, right? And they couldn't do anything, go out, meet friends, go out and hang out as a way to de-stress. They were on most of the day and most of the weekend too, simply because their computer was on all the time and they couldn't go out anywhere. So that actually started, I think, impacting their mental well-being. So we had to work with that as well. We had to tell people explicitly that, you know, do not email over the weekends. And even if you do receive any messages, there is absolutely no obligation that you respond. Just wait till Monday morning. Nothing's going to happen. We had to keep reinforcing this message over and over.
Yeah, I can imagine. And that sounds good. I think a lot of companies weren't doing that, right? They were just kind of leaving everyone to their own devices, and people were really, I think from a mental health standpoint, like you're saying, really letting that build up and that responsibility just assume that, you know, if the boss is emailing them, then they ought to reply, even if it is 3 p.m. on a Sunday, you know. So when did lockdown initially kind of kick in India? I assume it was around the same time as here in the UK, right? Like, was it sort of March, April?
I think it was mid-March. Yeah, I forget the exact dates. It's been so long.
Right, exactly. So now that we're adapted, let's say, or at least we're in some degree used to it, how do you think that that's affected the kind of culture of KISSFLOW specifically?
A lot of people have been asking, what do you need to do for remote work, or how has it impacted the culture? I think my understanding is, or what we've learned is that your culture gets exposed during something like this. It's not the time for you to try and do new things. It's kind of where you can reap the benefits of what you've built for so long. If you've given people an environment where they need to manage their own work, kind of like a self-managed systems, where employees are rewarded to seek clarity by themselves and not wait for a manager to tell them what to do, then the transition to remote work is easy. Couple of other things that really helped us, which I felt, I don't know how do you put it, like it's not like we planned for remote work, but we were planning for scaling. So the problem that happens with successful companies, and that's the thing that we work on in culture, is when you scale, we kind of start becoming more bureaucratic, more policy, process driven. Things just start to stagnate. And you do need some policies and processes as you scale. So one of the things we decided was, hey, there is no way we're going to beat this by scaling or just like every other company. So we restructured our company around products. So instead of having one KISSFLOW, we actually have about 5-6 KISSFLOWs inside. All of you are in one squad. You guys have a revenue target or a product release target. You do what is necessary to get the job done. Right? So you become very outcome focused in that sense. You're lean, but you're still delivering value that meets the company objective. Jeff Bezos had this thing, right? Like the 2 pizza rule. If your team is bigger than that can be fed by 2 pizzas, you're too big. So all of these things we did just before lockdown. So when lockdown hit, we were small enough, nimble enough, and had clarity on goals to help people just run towards it.
Hey, that's it for today's episode. Thanks for listening. If you have something that you'd like us to talk about or somebody you'd like us to talk to, then email us wfh@lowerstreet.co. Otherwise, please do get subscribed, because we'll be back with new content every Monday, Wednesday and Friday.